We cannot agree with the notion that security issues, collective security, should now be decided without the participation of the Russian Federation. That will not work. The President has repeatedly said that we are ready to work in any format, with the understanding that the work will be honest and will not be limited to attempts, as the leaders of the leading European countries do, to create conditions to once again drag the United States into their aggressive, belligerent campaign to preserve and even strengthen Ukraine as an instrument to contain Russia, as an instrument to wage war against our country and against everything Russian that exists here in the region, including on the territory of Ukraine. Following the phone conversation between President Putin and President Trump, when the American leader called the Kremlin to tell how his contact with Zelensky and with a delegation of European accompanying persons were going, a statement was made to representatives of the Kremlin, in which it was said that Putin confirmed his readiness to continue direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations. Negotiations, which, as you know, took place and, in general, remain on the agenda. They took place in Istanbul. There were 3 rounds. Agreements were reached on humanitarian issues, exchange of prisoners, and return of the bodies of deceased servicemen. And at the last, 3rd round, our negotiators proposed creating 3 working groups to more specifically consider the points on the agenda of the groups on military, humanitarian, and political issues. So far, no response has been received from Ukraine. But following the phone conversation the day before yesterday with President Trump, our president made a proposal not just to continue these negotiations, but also to consider raising the level of the heads of delegations. And this fits precisely into our proposal, which I just mentioned, that within this process, a separate block will be dedicated to considering the political aspects of the settlement, along with military and humanitarian ones. It is clear that the reaction of the Ukrainian side does not depend on us, but since this idea was positively received by President Trump, we expect that he will convey it and explain it to the Kyiv representatives, and we will get a reaction. This would be an important step to raise the level of negotiations, to increase the degree of specificity, and to move closer to considering the key issues that need to be resolved for a sustainable settlement. Under all circumstances, as I have already said, we are ready for any formats, but when it comes to high-level meetings, it is necessary to prepare them in the most thorough way at all preceding stages, so that the summits do not result in a worsening of the situation, but truly put an end to the negotiations that we are ready to continue. You know, we naturally monitor what is happening in the international community, including within the Western camp, regarding the developments surrounding Ukraine. I have already had the opportunity and the satisfaction to emphasize that we are observing an increasingly clear understanding by our partners in the United States of the need to eliminate the root causes of the crisis, rather than trying to support those who voice lofty slogans about an immediate ceasefire while at the same time saying that a ceasefire does not mean an end to the continued supply of weapons to Ukraine. Such a statement was recently made by French President Macron. It is good that this absolutely reckless, confrontational position, a position in support of prolonging the war, is not being understood or supported by the current U.S. administration. That administration is trying to delve into the essence of the problem and help eliminate the root causes that gave rise to this crisis, which I have once again spoken about today, and which President Putin has repeatedly addressed. As for reports that the United Kingdom, France, and Germany want to develop collective security guarantees, with support such guarantees being genuinely reliable. And here, we have a very good example, which, by the way, comes from an initiative of the Ukrainian side itself, namely, what took place in Istanbul in April 2022, when the Ukrainian negotiating team proposed a basic principle for ending hostilities and achieving a sustainable resolution. Among those principles was Ukraine's renunciation of joining NATO or any other military alliances, and confirmation of Ukraine's neutral and non-nuclear status. In this context, the Ukrainian side proposed, and our delegation at the time agreed, to develop security guarantees involving all permanent members of the UN Security Council, the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, the United States, France, and the United Kingdom, as well as certain other countries. Germany was mentioned, Turkey was mentioned, and other countries that may be interested in joining this group of security guarantors. In that context, the Ukrainian proposal clearly implied that these guarantees would be equal. The security of all interested parties, including Ukraine's neighbors, would be ensured on an equal, balanced, and indivisible basis. That approach, as I said, was supported by the Russian side at the time. In April 2022, we were ready. In fact, that document was initialed, and we were prepared, after that initialing, to sign an official agreement. But as is well known, the President has reminded of this many times. Boris Johnson, the then British Prime Minister, arrived and forbade his protégés in Kyiv from signing anything. He demanded the continuation of hostilities. So, had it not been for that circumstance, I believe much could have already been accomplished in terms of achieving a sustainable settlement and securing the interest of all countries and peoples living in our shared geopolitical space. Therefore, we cannot agree with the notion that security issues, collective security, should now be decided without the participation of the Russian Federation. That will not work. We have explained many times that Russia does not overstate its interests, but we will firmly and resolutely defend our legitimate interests. And I am confident that the West, primarily the United States, fully understands that discussing security seriously without Russia is a utopia. It's a road to nowhere.